Welcome to Beyond the Corporate Ladder, thoughtful conversations on leadership, growth, and long-term perspective with your host, Stephen Lee Thomas. Each episode features thoughtful conversations with leaders and operators about growth, decision-making, and what it really looks like to build a meaningful life as your career evolves. All right, everyone, welcome back to Beyond the Corporate Ladder. Today, my guest is Randy Campadore, and he is a high-performing coach for men in midlife. And I remember reading his bio. We're just chatting about it right now. Really fascinated by his journey and his mission and how he's really helping people. And I thought he would be a fantastic guest to be on the show, the insights and how he helps people where they're at, really achieve that success and fulfillment, because we know that changes over time. So Randy, thank you so much for joining us. Can you give us a little bit more about your background and what it is you're currently doing?
You bet. Thank you, Stephen, for inviting me. Yeah, my background has primarily been in real estate development, construction. I started in 1977, and even up to last year, I did a couple of small projects, but primarily I stopped in 2016. For I needed change in life. I mean, I grew up with a, lower middle class family on a working ranch. And I say working because you started working at 6 years old.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So I got a work ethic built in early. At, my two brothers, it was very competitive. They were athletes. I was an athlete. And then something shifted about when I was 14 years old. Again, that really was impactful in my life. And I'd gone to my grandmother and I asked for a loan to buy a motorcycle. And she said, no, we don't have enough money. And I think you're just too young. And so 2 weeks later, she bought both my brother's cars. I was disappointed,
Wow.
Angry. Yeah. So I went to my mom and we'd run, we lived out in the country, so it's pretty safe back then. And I start complaining to her, I can't believe, grandma did this and grandma's got lots of money and I don't know why. It's just a loan. And she buys them and gives them a car. And she stopped and she said, let me ask you a question. I mean, think about it before you answer. Does she owe you anything? I thought about it. No. She goes, then why do you expect her to give you something? So if you want something, go get it yourself. I was 14 years old. And that kind of segued into my life. You don't expect other people just to give you something. I wasn't the kid who was going to sit there and, have an expectation. And then I went to WSU to play football in 1974, and I got hurt right away and realized school wasn't my thing. So I quit, and I was very fortunate. Another impactful thing that happened in my life this is pushing me along in life. I'm just kind of going with kind of flow, they call it. And I had just gotten a job and I was going into management. I lived with the manager, but then I ended up realizing the Teamsters was representing the group and they were lying. So I basically led a strike.
Oh, wow.
And that strike cost me my job. And so at 10 in the morning, I end up, walking to a local bar and sitting there and it's empty and I need the bartender. And I go in, never in the day. And they just say, he goes, what are you doing? I said, well, I just got fired. And he goes, oh, drinks on me. And I said, okay, great, take it. I don't have a job now. All of a sudden, I hear the door close behind me. Like, what kind of guy comes in at 10 in the morning? And next thing I know, he looks at the bartender. He said, hey, the usual. And he looked at me and said, mind if I have a seat? And I said, no, go ahead. And this story was the beginning of my career because he shared with me that he used to work for the same company and got fired. And he got into real estate and in sales. And he just got fired from that. And he's the laziest person in the world. I'm like, what the heck? And then he said, what kind of car do you drive? And I said, a Volkswagen. He goes, I drive Monte Carlo. And right then I knew my career was in real estate. And my second cousin just happened to be at the same company he got fired for. So long story short, I called him and I started. And I got fired from that company. And it wasn't from being lazy.
So, Randy, I'm picking up on a theme here.
I got pushed along, Stephen. I really did. And it wasn't because I got fired for being lazy. It was the opposite. I got fired because the manager wanted me to lie and fabricate stories as your sales, it's kind of, and I refused. And so, I was going to be his protege, and I said no. So he fired me. And long story short, the owner, forerunner said, no, no, we want you to come back. We will miss you. And, it wasn't about you. And he's trying to pull his power, come back in 6 months. And I'm like, I'm not coming back here. And it pushed me into commercial real estate because that's where I went. Phone book. We used to have a phone book, when you actually look at, pick the number, and I ended up in commercial real estate. And that was the beginning of my career, because then I ended up 3 years after I began real estate, 1977. In 1980, I started working on my first project, which is a 120,000 square foot shopping center. My partner didn't know, he had a lot of money, but he didn't know how to do it. I did it. And we sold it in 1988 for 16.5 million. And that was a lot of money back then.
It's a lot of money today.
And it's a lot of money today. Yeah.
And so how does that lead you to what you're doing today? Because you have since moved out of real estate.
Correct. And so what happened is I started living a kind of an illusionary luxury lifestyle. I had the private jet lifestyle, the yacht, and I wasn't satisfied. I mean, I was missing something. I didn't know what it was. My friends, same way. And so I lived that lifestyle, searching, went through programs, went through therapy. And then in 2008, the Great Recession hit me hard. I had 60 million in loans, and I got in a fight with the bank, and 8 years later I lost. And during that time, in 2013, I got in a paragliding accident, almost cost me my life. It was pretty bad. I ended up in trauma. And so I had to go through recovery, dealing with a fight with the bank, and it broke me down, Stephen. It really took me what they call the dark night of the soul. And so in 2016, I quit real estate, went into a depression, and kind of stayed there for a while, trying to figure out, blame you, what happened to my life. I knew, my wealth was going to be gone soon because the bank, the interest rate. And so I actually decided to go on a 2-year hiatus. So in 2021, my girlfriend and I got a van, sold the ranch, sold everything, and then took off. And by that time, the bank took the money, so I really didn't have much. And it was very cathartic for me, Stephen, because I had to deal with myself. I had to look in the mirror objectively now, not subjectively. And the mirror doesn't lie. It tells the truth. And it was telling me that I was living a lifestyle that didn't fit me. And that I was more, to me, it's helping people. It's giving back. And so I started studying neuroscience, biology, psychology, some quantum physics. A lot of that came to my life because of what had happened, because of my dark night of the soul experience. And something I didn't share with you is when I was in the hospital, I crashed in Mexico City on New Year's Eve in 2012. I was in the hospital and no one working. It's third world country. There's nobody there. Couldn't get medication. I've got, 2 friends I was doing business with. I've done other things other than real estate at that time. In Mexico City, we're trying to get a jet to get me out of there back to Seattle, which is my hometown, to a trauma center, and there were no jets. They were all busy. It's the busiest time of the year, I was told. So long story short, about 3 a.m, by myself, not many pain meds, hardly at all. So I was lucid, and a surgeon came in at 3 a.m, and I'm thinking, you're going to operate on me? He said, I can. I come back in the morning. I know you're really bad off. And so just, reach out and let me know. Now I start to panic. And I'm sharing this story because I had an experience that I'd never had before, never thought I'd have. And just after he left, I started, my breathing went erratic and I started to panic, and I hear a whoosh sound. And then wind go by my body. and a voice that said, "You'll be okay. You'll be okay." And then the whoosh, the sound, and the gone, and it was gone. I calmed down. 3 hours later, I get a phone call from one of the companies that said, "I found you a jet." Guy on his own time.
Mm-hmm.
That impacted my life. And so I'm sharing that story because it sent me on a journey of doing deep into reflection of why people like me, men like me, they're high performing, that, I had all the money you'd ever want, the lifestyle, which people dream about. And I was just felt soulless. I was searching and I just didn't know where to find it. And now I realized this is my calling. This is where I want to spend my attention. That's when I started studying and took off on the journey. And it led me to today.
Okay. And so now you work with people, primarily men, um, midlife,
Yeah.
and you help them. I'm gonna let you fill in the words here, but
Yeah.
so I'll say there's something that happens in midlife, and that's really one of the reasons why I started this show. It's really more of a passion project for me.
Mm-hmm.
Just real quick, a little bit about me. I was climbing the corporate ladder. I was making fantastic money, and I looked around. And I'm like, this sucks. I'm gonna waste away here. Like this is miserable. I can't do this, right? So there's this moment when things shift. Like I had this belief of go get a job, go to school, get a degree, get a job, get the career, climb the ladder, success, right? And a lot of changes. And so I want to learn more about, how you reach over and help lots of people,
Mm.
men specifically, how you help them, bridge that gap. What does that
Yeah.
look like?
Yeah. So basically, I call it's an identity crisis, right? I mean, you're going along, you have this career, you think you've hit all of your buttons, you've won the lottery, whatever it is, and you're just not happy, and you don't know why. And that's because a lot of times, and I actually wrote a book called Beyond Limits: Shifting Beliefs and Reshaping Reality, which came out last year on Amazon. And I talk about it's our belief system that kind of holds us hostage. And we get a lot of our beliefs from childhood,
Hmm.
from that, especially 0 to 7, we're like monkey see, monkey do. And that carries forward. And what I found in my own life and in other men's lives that I've talked to, especially people that were like me, high performers, is that things are happening so fast and we get to the top of the mountain, right? It's a long climb. I mean, there's a lot of, it's hurdles to jump over and obstacles to go around, and my life was more entrepreneurial, nothing to do with corporate. And so, it was, you live by the sword and die by the sword. There was no set paycheck. There was nothing that was going to be there, no
Hmm.
guarantee. And so I found through time, especially watching my friends and myself, that we have an identity crisis. We don't know now who we are because we got to now we're mountain climber, we got to top of the mountain. Now what do? Do you become something different? Do you become another mountain? What do you do? And so it becomes a void kind of the soul and metaphorically speaking. And so what I do, and in fact I'll share a story real quick. A friend of mine, he's got 5 houses, the jet, the helicopter. He's like a brother to me. And we came through real estate together. And he survived 2008 only because he had family members and friends loaning him about 20 million to his story. So he was pretty big. He was really big, but he was ready to fall hard. But he survived it. And not only did he survive it, he came out so fast and so high that he probably 10x what income he thought he'd ever make. And he came from a fairly wealthy family to begin with. And so he knew, kind of what to do with money once he realized he almost lost it. And so he called me, and we've talked a lot over the years, but I hadn't talked to him for probably a year. Last Christmas before last, and he said, "Are you happy?" And it was 6 in the morning, so I know he was on a kind of an all-nighter. And I said, "Why?" He said, "I just want to know." I said, "Well, about 60%, 55% happy, probably. I don't know, somewhere in there, 50. But I'm working on it every day, and I think within the next, 5 years, I'd like to get up to 75% if that's possible, but I'm working towards it. How about you? He goes, nah, I don't believe in it anymore. I've really tried to find purpose, and I don't think it exists. All the programs, the therapy, everything. I said, okay, you know, that's a choice you can make. And here's what I've just decided, and I've worked with enough. I said, he wasn't a client, he was a friend, but I've had clients just like that, and I'll be talking to one again on Sunday. And it's kind of the same story. You know, they want to know what it is, but they don't really want to go into that scary place to find it, which is going inside yourself. You know, you got to ask yourself some serious questions, you know, when you're looking into the mirror. You know, who am I? Really? I mean, how many MIs are there? I'm a father, I'm a husband, or a boyfriend, or I'm a, you know, attorney, I'm a developer, and you name it. There's so many personalities we have, so many identities. And then all of a sudden, you realize none of them are working. Or maybe they are. I just need to shorten them, whatever it is. And that's what I do. I try to just put a mirror in front of someone. For me, it's, you know, midlife men who have the wealth, but they mostly have given up their health, whether it's emotional, physical, spiritual, you know, so they've got the money, but they're suffering. And I just put the mirror in front of them and say, let's talk about what does make you happy. You know, what life would you like to have? What would make your life better? You know, and the last one, of course, is what do you think will happen if you don't change anything 5 years from now? What's your life going to be like? You know, it's just a thinking process. And I call it, I've got an acronym. It's called TBAR. Thoughts, beliefs, actions, create results. You know, and your thoughts are coming in constantly. And over time, you think a thought enough times, it becomes a belief. And then that belief will create action, which become habits. And before you know it, you've got these results that you don't want. You want different results, but you're not changing the way you're thinking. And so my response, my role is to try to get men to really think objectively, to strip down the ego and the pride, which is a big part of our life. It was a big part of my life. In fact, to be honest, it still is a part of my life that I try to cognitively rationalize, not just let it just come in and say, okay, is this my ego speaking, trying to protect me? I'll share one more thing with you real quick. It's in my book. A lot of these are in my book.
Okay. And the name of your book again? This is important.
Yeah.
Because if your book is full of these golden nuggets, it's
a
very important book. What's the name of your book again?
Beyond Limits, Shifting Beliefs and Reshaping Reality.
And where can we get that book?
Amazon.
Okay.
Look under my name, Randy Campadore.
Okay. All right. So we'll make sure we provide in the show notes how someone can get a hold of that book as well. But I'm sorry for interrupting. Go ahead.
No, that's good.
And share this other one.
In fact, well, and so it's about, you know, thoughts and beliefs and actions and, you know, your results. Most of the time, we don't really think about the things we do. You know, we want a certain outcome, for example, but we just continue the same thoughts. It's like, some people say, I want to be rich, and yet they stay in their job 9 to 5. And then they're on the couch by 5 o'clock. And then they're playing games or whatever, but it's like, and they're going to get the same results. And what I do is try to, you know, peel back the onion, as they say. It's like, what is it you really want? Because what you're saying you want and what you're doing, they're not matching. They're opposing. And so, you know, I can share with you, in the first chapter of my book is about childhood trauma, by the way, because we all have some form of childhood trauma. We just sometimes don't want to admit it or don't
Sure.
understand it until you.
Uh-huh.
And I was my girlfriend, got tired of me sharing with friends the same story. After 2016, I lost it with the bank in 2019. So I had 3 years to kind of before I knew the hammer was coming, and then everything was gone. The life I knew had vaporized rather, and so I looked at finally one of my friends, and I could see the wind taken out of him when he asked, "How are you today? How are you doing?" And I said, it was their fault. My cousin betrayed me. He was my business partner. This betrayal, that betrayal. It was all betrayals. The bank, everybody. It wasn't my fault. And we got home, and my girlfriend took me aside. And she said, "Okay, you know what? I've heard this story so many times. I really don't want to hear it anymore." She goes, "But I got to ask you a question. Where'd you lose your money? Maybe you didn't lose it. You just misplaced it, and we can go find it. Or perhaps you can admit the truth. You trusted too many people and you made some poor business decisions. That's why your money's not there anymore. So, what's your story now? Think of a new one because I don't want to hear it anymore." And that hit me like a ton of bricks.
Wow. Yeah, that would. That would. Those are
Yeah,
like tough conversations, but you probably needed to hear it.
I did. It was the shake-up call. That's kind of was the beginning of I need to change my environment. And that's what we did, by the way. We 2 years we went all the way to Mexico, Guatemala. That's other stories, but we did. I needed to get out of the fishbowl because everything was the same. I was saying, I just wasn't. I wasn't willing to change at that time because it gave me a reason to it was an excuse. Okay. And it kept me stuck. I call it it's the human treadmill,
Uh-huh.
an imaginary cage with a treadmill in it. And we're on this treadmill and we have blinders on with goggles playing the same story over and over and over again. And we look over and we think, well, the cage door's closed. I can't get out. So I just gotta, and you're stuck. And what I share with people is there is no cage door. There is no stuck. It's in your mind. And until you start to really look at your life again, objectively, that's one of my favorite words, nothing's going to change. And again,
Oh, hey, I lost you. Can you hear me? Hey, John, can you hear me? I can't hear you. Can you hear me? Check, check. You're muted. You just went on mute somehow. I'm gonna put that. So maybe I'm gonna ask you to unmute. Did you get a prompt there to unmute?
yeah,
Okay. All right. We will edit that out, okay?
yeah,
Okay. That's why I did the hand clap. It spikes the audio really
I
quick. And okay.
understand.
Okay. Um, all right. All of a sudden it went blank and you were talking about,
Oh, the monkey mind.
yes. Okay. Monkey mind. So we'll go back to that.
So in Buddhism, it's called the monkey mind. And it's basically a subconscious mind. And I call it the monkey voice because we hear it all the time, incessantly. And the monkey voice is not our friend, but sometimes we think it is. And it'll say things like, "Hey, yeah, go ahead. You're better than that person. Let them know it." Or whatever. And you're like, "Oh, you're right." And it might be in a meeting, business meeting, and you speak up and you're like, and all of a sudden it's not because everybody we are put down, whatever. It's a mistake. And the monkey goes, you know, "See, I showed you, you're stupid. You're an idiot. And that's what it does. And it's that sort of relationship we have with our past self doubts. And by the way, we all have them in some form at some points in our life. And you can't eliminate the voice, but you can listen to it and you can say, okay, I hear you, but I don't agree with you. But, thank you for sharing and move on. All too often, Stephen, we get caught up with hearing that voice
Hmm.
and we recognize it and we think, okay, well, it's true. Whatever it's saying is true. And with men, a lot of times ego, especially with men with power, men with money, it's saying, you're the greatest, you're the best, you know, nobody's better than you. And you can prove it. In fact, you should prove it. And it's big, it's ego. And instead, their life is just not, I mean, it's on this, they're inside the cage trying to prove to other people there's something, and they're really not because they're really unhappy, unfulfilled, searching for an identity. And they hold on to that one thing, my wealth. And that's where I
Because of
was.
a belief that it is defining their identity. So it's really interesting, this conversation about identity. So one of my favorite classes in college was adolescent psychology. And one
Mm,
of the things that I've always held on to, like really holding on to for the moment when I have children, um, is, so what I learned is there is the moment when you have children and they start to rebel against you.
mm,
And the reason for that is because when we're born and we're very little, our identity is based on like our parents. Like they define what that identity is. They buy our clothes, right? Everything we do, that the friends we hang out with, it's because of the circles of our parents, and that's the identity. And when you go through that identity crisis, when you hit that certain age in adolescence, that's when you start to rebel, is because you're like, I don't know who the hell I am. Like I'm trying to find out who I am, and you're trying on these different identities. And then that kind of starts to slow down. It's probably different for men and women and individuals, but it takes a while to go through that identity crisis. So one of the like aha moments I'm taking away from this right now is the belief that you redefine yourself in that identity and you've got it figured out. That's your identity. What I'm learning is that that identity suits you for a while, and at some point in time, it's almost like you're going through the same moment again where you're like, I need to redefine my identity here, but we're so far along and we think we're so smart that it clearly can't be the identity I've chosen. There's got to be something else here that's making me happy. But what I hear you saying is that there is a very similar moment in time where we go through this. And I think the more we can accept that and be open to it and listen to this voice and seek additional guidance, we can be, I think you hit the nail on the head, is there's this moment of I'm unhappy, I'm unfulfilled, and we're seeking this purpose. If we can shift our beliefs enough, which is hard, as my where I'm leading up to this, then we can start to move in that direction.
yep.
So first is,
Yep.
am I picking up what you're putting down? Because
Hmm.
that's where I just keep going back to this,
Yeah.
like
Yes.
it's just part of who we are. It's just part of, that's what happens. And it's a brand new identity shift. Um, so then let me ask you this. Um, there's probably multiple things a person can do, but someone listening, if they're like, man, like Randy's telling my story right now, what's one thing they could do right now today to help them like implement a strategy to, start moving in a better direction?
Well, one of the first things they can do is really write down their thoughts. I mean, because thoughts drive our behavior. And, whether you keep a notebook or you've got your phone, your iPad, whatever it is you have, and keep track of those thoughts for about 30 days. Because, you don't need to, some people want to rush through it, but you just need to see there will be a pattern. And then at the same time, start identifying your beliefs. I believe, you know, whatever it is, many, many things we can believe. And over 30 days, you'll start to see a pattern. And then at the same time, at the beginning of 30 days, write down what it is you want, or what you think you want. You know, maybe it's have better relationships with your family, your wife. Maybe, you want to be appreciated more. Maybe you want to be in better shape, eat healthier, exercise more. You know, there's a lot of what is it you want? So then in 30 days, you can see, you can identify what you're thinking and what your beliefs are. But over here, you're going to realize this is where I want to go. But you're going to realize in the middle, once you're done, you can look, okay, these are what's happening is not what I want. And that's just the beginning of the understanding. That's just kind of like all of a sudden now you're in third grade, moved out of kindergarten in a way. It's just an opening.
That's an aha moment.
Yes. Because then you really look at it and say, oh, I'm not so the next question is, well, how do I get what I want if I'm here and I'm in the cage on the treadmill? How do I get out? I know there is no out, but how do I change my life to get what I want? And that's becomes where my work comes in.
That's where you step in. So, okay, I want to in the overall journey of people. So someone's going to be listening to this who maybe they're not quite to that point yet. Maybe they're a little bit earlier on in their career. But I think inevitably we're all going to go down a similar path. What's something that you wish you understood sooner that you could share with someone, like as they're getting to this moment, that they should think differently about?
Well, one thing I didn't touch on, health, because right now I can tell you today is, as we know, change is happening at a rapid pace. AI is the disruptor. I mean, forget all the other, things that are happening, whether it's, potential wars or whatever stuff. There's a lot of negativity. There's a lot of emotional distress today. And more than before, probably any time in our history, because I call it the great disruptor to me is AI for careers. What you've thought you had set, maybe your mid-career, and you think I've got another, 15 years before I'm going to exit, 10, whatever it is you're in. And maybe even if you make $500,000 a year, but you haven't invested like you have, you don't have apartment buildings and you don't have income and revenue, cash flow streams outside your corporate job, as an example. And all of a sudden, AI takes your job. Where's your identity now? I mean, yeah, it's pretty shattered, really. And then you try to go, I was having a conversation with a friend, you try to go to a headhunter. Well, headhunters, unless they're top of the food chain, they don't really have a job either. And the ones that do are saying, you pay me up front, pay me, and I'll go try to find you a job.
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, I don't have a job now. How am I supposed to pay you when I don't have any income? And so this is kind of a crossroads. And I'm sharing that because I think now more than any time in history, you look at the airplane, the computer, the refrigerator, phone, whatever, I don't care. Nothing is happening what's happening now exponentially. And so for me, it's getting men to become aware, not only men, but, humans, become awake. Your identity is going to change. We have to adapt. It's that time where the meteor is coming down, they're going to hit the earth, and it's going to wipe out, I don't be a doomsdayer because I think we will survive. It's just the jobs are going to be displaced. It's happening. We know that. Mm-hmm. And it's your identity is going to change back to the identity. And you just need to look at it and say, what can I do? And for me, doing it alone is difficult. I didn't do it alone. I was fortunate. I had someone help me. I had a coach. And it really brought me through and questioned me. And when I would my ego would step in, he'd say, are you talking to the mirror right now? Or are you talking to someone like me or someone that doesn't know you? Because the mirror knows you, I know you, but yeah, the other person doesn't know you. But you want to rethink what you just said? And it's my ego. I think people need to get past that mid-level. I mean, people with money, they don't have, it's going to be, they're working identity. That's different. People in midlife that have a career like what you had possibly, it's a game changer. And I think that's where I come in. I can help them before they go, the provider is your man. You're used to providing. I mean, I'm trying not to label right now. I know things have changed, but it's
But it's
now you're not.
intrinsic. That's like undeniably intrinsic. And I mean, I believe it is intrinsic. There's probably some cultural influence there, but I hear exactly what you're saying. The identity of I'm a man, I'm a provider. Um, and that is if you get displaced or there's the identity crisis, it begins to like eat away at you.
Yeah.
Like tears into your soul. It's
Mm, mm.
like, and that's, and if and I think what I hear you saying is like the awareness, like be aware of like the
Yes.
change is inevitable, like the wave is going to come because like what are the technology things that you've seen in your life? There's going to be the internet, right? A huge
Hmm.
one. AI, a huge one. I heard something the other day that a lot of people think about how hard their life is, and it was like 100 years ago, people didn't have running hot water, right? They were very successful without running hot water. Like
Yeah.
there is and there's places in the world that still exist like that. So
Yeah.
the those leaps, those changes are going to happen. That
Yeah.
that's what I hear is your common thread is like just really understanding the change is inevitable. It doesn't define you or make you a worse person. You just need to understand that. And I can see where someone like you can come in and help because there's a lot of work to do there. There's a lot of work to do there when that happens.
Yeah. Well, I've spent years doing a lot of that work. In fact, I started in therapy when I was in my late 30s. I spent 2 years and it worked for a while. It was like putting a band-aid on a wound because you're clinical, you're in their space, you're
Hmm.
not in your space, not in your environment. And after a couple of years, I felt good. But about 6 months later, I kind of start going back to old habits, the old thoughts, and I'm not the only one. It's pretty common. And I think today I've spent so much time, and I am basically the same person that I'm talking to. And I'm, like I said, I'll be talking to a client Sunday, and it's a process because he's got a family, kind of like you know, and he's concerned. But as we're talking through it, it's more of preparing for an identity shift. It's like, okay, you're a father, you're a husband. What else do you want to be? Well, and forget the legacy for now. What is it? What will be your next evolutionary change? And you've hit on some things that are pretty important, I think, Stephen, and that is, it's change is kind of inevitable. It's coming. And it's adaptability that's going to be important. And I think the more people that get the message, kind of have the wake up call, you know, a lot of men I know, they're still hitting the drinking a lot to kind of ease the pain. And I go back to mental health, and I think that's where a lot of it's going to come from, emotional, mental health. And I haven't talked about this much, but I'm a 71-year-old workout junkie. I still compete in sports. Uh, I exercise a lot. I've got a very healthy diet. I always have. You know, I know I'm an anomaly. I get it, but I know what it takes. I know how to make change, and I know how not to succumb to that monkey voice, even though it tries. And so I've got a lot of experience, and I've taken a lot of years to try to figure out not only how to help myself come out of the dark night of the soul, but how to help other men come do the same. So,
Perfect. Randy, I have really enjoyed our time together. If somebody wants to connect with you, learn more about you, maybe even work with you, what's the best way for them to reach out and connect with you?
well, you can go to randylcampadore.com. It's RandyLCampadore.com. I'm also on LinkedIn, Facebook, and they can reach out to me and actually text me. Is a good one. And that's at 206-999-5555. And that is a real number.
It's a real number, direct to Randy. Randy, thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking the time and offering these insights.
Thank you, Stephen, for the invitation.
Absolutely. And everyone, thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll catch you in the next show. Thanks for spending time with me today on Beyond the Corporate Ladder. If this conversation resonated with you and you feel like you have a perspective that could add value for others, you can learn more about being a guest at beyondthecorporateladder.com. Thanks so much for listening.